to another episode of Signals and Symptoms podcast. We are live here from San Diego, all three of us. Believe it or not, we are all three in a different hotel room. And we are so happy to bring our friend Talia Baker. And we are excited about today's episode because this is really what we think about moving towards frontier of this. So make sure that you follow Talia on LinkedIn. We're going to put that in the show notes, and we're going to talk about her project, Lori MDT, in great detail. She's essentially a transplant surgeon and wants to improve communication and downstream. And one of the things that we're going to talk about in this particular episode is how to generate real world evidence for treatment. And we're going to get into this. This is going to be something truly amazing, what she is trying to build, and she has inspired me as well. I mean, we are retooling some of the stuff that we have already built for stroke, but also make it available for liver cancer. Just a reminder, we are all at AI Med, all three of the Stooges. This is literally the first time we have met in person. So FYI in you that how it is important that we actually meet in person. It is insane like how we are going through this process. The reminder again, Harvey delivered his TED Talk, the fifth TED Talk, and it is going to be out on video in January. So looking forward to it. So please make sure of that. Again, I'm not going to do my regular sort of updates that I do because we're going to do only discussion that is going to be relevant to this topic today. One of the important thing to understand is called OpenTSLM, which is time series language models. Now, the problem with the language models is that they are really great in generating data, but when you have to actually go through that fourth dimension, which is time, the large language models used to suck. But this one, there's a new open source model, which is essentially from Stanford, that they went to. First of all, they helped us create this, and then more importantly, they were able to understand that how this is going to move forward in terms of method. So those who are interested in looking at the technological part of things, you're going to see that patient reports this, then the time series encodes heart rate and oxygen at the same point. Again, remember these are two different events, then pretains and then text encodes, and then actually gives you the prediction what is called possible sleep apnea. This is a significant, important way of improving large language models in terms of time series and in terms of prediction of events in the future. The second thing I want to do is read is to bridge transitional gap, and this is what Talia is doing, which is what we are trying to help as well, is to make sure that we support not just clinical reasoning and decision making, but in a process where the transitional gap lies, and make sure that we enhance that process. So this is a beautiful, it's an opinion article, but this is something that is relevant to today's chat itself. The other article is that Think as a Doctor, I've shown this before, interpretal AI approach for ICU mortality prediction. And this is again one of those things that you need to understand, that once you are actually doing this, you need to understand the whole EHR, demographic attributes, physiological sequence. You see the sequence, and then these are time-based events. And over here, we are talking about HR MVP. I'm going to show you as far as cancer is concerned, which is again both EHR data, physiological data, and of course, most importantly, imaging data. And then we go into another article that is again very relevant to this particular process. Again, we want to teach other people is document summarization. I've talked about this before. This is actually very good, and we have actually implemented a lot of this information inside how to summarize the radiology reports, how to summarize pathology reports, etc., and not to miss any important information. So those who are looking at document summarization, that is in general, by the way, and EHR chat is also very important. So definitely look at that. Again, from Toronto, Canada, amazing people who have helped put this out, the research. Lastly, it is very important when we are doing experiments and when we were doing our internal experiments to understand the chain of influence. We always keep talking about chain of thought. Chain of thought is again, describe basically multiple steps, and then the LLM gets multiple, inputs, and then they go through the chain of thought. But it is also more important to understand chain of influence. So, for example, if you had a tumor, then you gave radiation, or you gave, chemo. what happens at the chain of influence. So you need to let LLM know that what the chain of influence is within the journey of the patient. And this is again very important to understand clinical predictive modeling, because once you understand this process of chain of influence, you should be able to go ahead and add this into the system. Um, this is really one of the core articles that is important to us, and Thalia is going to talk about this as well in depth, understanding accelerating clinical evidence synthesis. So remember, we do guidelines, and guidelines is an insanely long process with 5-year gap between actual what's happening and what the clinical evidence is all about. So we need to accelerate this process, and then one of the ways that it is doing so is, of course, we do literature search, screening, data extraction, and evidence synthesis. This is your regular process. But then once your literature search, you bring in all these comparisons, outcomes, etc. again inside the evidence, do the data extraction, and then actually evidence extraction and synthesis goes on. So this is something that is very dear to Thalia, and she's going to talk more about this in this podcast. And then lastly, of course, this is another one that have shared before, but I just want to reiterate why we are doing this, is large language model patient health trajectories. It's, again, extremely important. And of course, I want to talk, digital twins was a very good topic here at AI Med. Unfortunately, I was talking at another panel and missed that, but we're going to talk with Harvey. We're just going to break down one of these things. And the idea, again, similar, 0 days, 128 days. What really happens when you actually use the DT GPT? And I think we're going to, the trademark by Dr. GPT is going to go into forecasting and then, of course, learning itself. And then the last and I think most important article that I was given in NAGM AI article was about understanding trial scope, a framework for clinical trial simulation. And that's the real key benefit, is that even before you do a massive clinical trial that can cost millions of dollars, you can use the real world data to create a framework, and that framework you can test as if think of digital twin of a clinical trial.
Yeah.
So that is just amazing how you can go ahead and do that. It is important, and this is exactly what we're looking at. So where do I'm not gonna toot my own horn, but at this point in time, we really need to discuss this. I've not actually shown this. The benefit of Save Life AI is that first of all, we have radiology workflow, then we have clinical workflow, then we have data operations that are connected with all EHR, PACS, and DICOM with large data aggregators, and then we have clinical ops pipeline that you can do this. We actually initially built it for our acute neurology, which includes CliniChat, AI Chat, critical care. This is releasing within the next month or so, while you can actually do complete AI embedded. So if you have legal verification, patient imaging, complete node-specific navigators, AI chat for the different providers, CliniChat with the actual EHR, etc. And the idea behind it is that AI is baked into the whole patient journey from top to bottom, either it's in person or virtual. And then more importantly, this is something that we are building, is the exact medical chronology. Because the medical chronology needs to be very important, as noted in here, that this medical chronology, that what was the plan of care, procedures, etc. So we are officially building this as core, honestly, because we're getting a contract from personal injury. But eventually, I realized that there could be many, many use cases that we're going to go ahead with this medical chronology as well. So I'm going to stop here. I apologize, it took a little longer, but I just wanted to give you the whole scape of things. And then I'm going to let first Talia go ahead and introduce herself, the Lori project, and then, of course, Ed and Harvey is going to take over.
Perfect. Thank you so much. What an amazing introduction. So this is a really exciting time. I feel very grateful. My name is Talia Baker. I'm a clinical liver transplant and complex hepatobiliary surgeon. I've been in the space for a long time, for about 25 years, having the privilege of really building a career around liver transplant, living donor liver transplant, and ultimately kind of developing into someone who really was deeply into the liver transplant oncology space, which is consideration of liver transplantation as a solution for patients with liver cancers beyond the traditional criteria that we've always thought of. in that process, I really came to a point where I realized that as a clinician and having deep personal privileged relationships with patients, that the liver cancer journey is really broken. And in today's world, I think we can do better. And that's why I stepped away from clinical practice and really have committed myself to developing a platform where we could take all of the problems that I really lived and saw in my patients' journeys, and use the new technology that we have embedded deeply in the human component of what I believe is the heart of what we do as physicians and as patients going through these journeys, and make a process which is better for patients, saves lives, but importantly also addresses all the institutional challenges which cost institutions and the health system in general a tremendous amount of money. So I feel really lucky because I've kind of, my passion is liver cancer, but I really see this generalizable to all cancers, because as much as I understand that the liver cancer journey is broken, and I have lived and have deep knowledge and am privileged to have a great network around the country of people who are committed to making liver cancer better. If we can figure out this process, I think we can make cancer care in general a process which will benefit everybody, health systems, our health, our health cost systems, but most importantly, patients and their families as they go through the journey. Liver cancer also is a very unique process because in the last 5 to 10 years, in terms of biotech and big pharma, the treatments that are today available, this is kind of amazing, because when I first got into this about 15 years ago, we were trying to give people survival advantages of anywhere from 2 months to a year by offering sequence treatments which would bring them through to a destination transplant. In today's world, with the new tech and big pharma that has come out, we can actually offer patients potential cure. So the world has changed, the medical system hasn't kept up, and physicians are tied to institutional biases, incentive structures, and local expertise, which really put patients at risk for not being able to get what could be best practice and standard treatment. And we're trying to universalize that for all. But we're also staying very invested in the fact that at the heart of any health system, there has to be the clinician-patient relationship. So we're developing a platform in Lori MDT Connect. Lori is Liver Oncology Reimagined. It is deeply based on clinician-led multidisciplinary teams, but it takes advantage of what we have developed in AI to facilitate the process, to bring it to all patients, regardless of their geography, regardless of where they end up, and make sure that they and their clinicians have the ability to make informed decisions about how they can get to a place where their quality of life, quantity of life, and the cost of the delivery of their health care is improved.
Perfectly, beautifully put. Ed, do you mind?
Yeah, so with that, yeah.
Do you want to go give your sort of problem statement when you were going through the prostate journey with the context of what Talia said, and then start the conversation?
Well, this is amazing, and I'm so thankful whenever, I meet new people that are doing amazing things to help improve the life of other humans. I've always feel so privileged myself and so lucky to be just having this conversation. But it reminds me of something someone said, I think on one of our podcasts, that we're practicing on today's patients using yesterday's technology, hoping for a future better outcome. Something like that. I wrote that down. But people like Dr. Baker are definitely tackling that. Yeah, I'd be super curious to talk about at a high level, because I know we have a ton of questions. But like, what is what's the old process, today's process for most organizations, and then leveraging your system, what could it be? I had cancer, and I'm sure it wasn't liver cancer, but I'm sure it's something similar where it took them forever to ultimately diagnosed me. I mean, it took them a long time. I mean, all that time I went from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, had they had better tech and different things like that. I don't want to talk about my story so much as just to hear from you, like, how does your system solve this? So what is the old way for that a liver patient might go through with cancer, and what is the new way with your technology? I think that would really help bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, and to be honest, our technology is very much in the visionary stage right now. But the problems that we're addressing most significantly are exactly what you're describing. As patients enter the health system with a cancer diagnosis, the system is super fragmented and siloed. As you described, we know a lot and we're not applying it. Multidisciplinary care of cancer patients has been proven time and time again to improve patient outcomes, to decrease system costs, and to ensure that patients have timely access with limited care gaps to their sequenced treatment. That being said, if you look around the country right now in liver cancer care, less than 25% of institutions around the country have access to true multidisciplinary care. So the very high-end academic institutions, which are about the top 1% in the healthcare system in North America, have really beautifully designed multidisciplinary teams. But even those are flawed because they are limited by that institution's biases, local expertise, and incentive structures. So I'll just give you a very broad example. If a patient with liver cancer, a 65-year-old gentleman with what we all are suffering with today, which is metabolic-associated liver disease in the United States, which is becoming an epidemic. So a patient arrives at a hospital with a diagnosis, a newly diagnosed cancer, liver cancer, on imaging. There are beautiful LIRAD systems now which will diagnose that. The problem is that as that patient enters the system, there are multiple siloed directions that that patient will be led in. They'll be sent to a hepatologist, a liver doctor, for consideration for transplantation. They'll be sent to an interventional oncologist for consideration of local regional therapy. They'll be sent to a surgeon, not necessarily a transplant surgeon, but a surgical oncologist for consideration of resection, and perhaps a medical oncologist for consideration of systemic therapy, because that has become a thing today. That being said, that patient's ultimate care package will likely be dictated by whatever appointment they got first, not by what the best treatment is for them up front, but whose office has an opening in a proximal time. So if you play it out, that person goes to a surgical oncologist, they get an upfront resection because that surgical oncologist had someone cancel on their Thursday 2 p.m. slot and they need to fill their OR time, right? They need to fill their block time. That patient's outcome is now decreased to potentially less than 20% 5-year overall survival. Whereas if they had gotten to the hepatologist first, gotten local regional therapy, and gone to transplant, their survival at 5 years would be 96%. So
Yeah.
those are things which in my mind, we have to fix. And that's
Yeah.
what Lori's trying to do.
No, I love that. And Dr. Baker, you're right. You said it earlier that what you're developing is necessary not just with liver transplantation, but
Yes.
the whole ecosystem. Because when you're going through that story, oh my gosh, I know that story all too well. And then the other thing that came to my mind, and Junaid, we need to remind people of this, you know, how you go through so beautifully, collect all the week's data, talk about all these great capabilities. But to Dr. Baker's point, 1% of our health system is actually can have that capacity to do it. You got to be lucky. And even in that, if you're at the, I don't want to name names, but at those preeminent institutions, you got to be lucky that there's a physician there that's thinking like this holistically. We have so far to go. Sometimes we could be misled. I think we're at this great conference and people are doing amazing things and we think that everyone's doing it. But the fact is, no, it's all in little silos, and we need to continue to innovate and get products out like Dr. Baker's doing.
Yeah, and I think we've recognized that the foundation of what makes us special our moat really is our independence, because we are taken outside of the institutional expertise, bias, incentive structures. We are keeping it deeply human and patient-centered, and we're facilitating the patient journey and the ability to integrate the patient's journey into a continuously learning model through the platform. So our mission statement has kind of evolved into something that I'm very proud of, but it says exactly what you say. We're really trying to redefine liver cancer care and take out liver, because it's cancer care, through accessibility, collaboration, and intelligence. And we really want to make world-class treatment a shared standard rather than a privilege. And I think that's the bottom line. It shouldn't depend on whether you live in Ohio and have access to Cleveland Clinic, or whether you live on a ranch in Montana, what your outcome is if you present with a cancer.
I'm a contrarian, and the reason that I say that is because I want to make sure that we understand this. So let me give you two examples. So I trained at UT Southwestern Dallas, Texas for both neurocritical care and epilepsy, and then of course stroke. Now, neurocritical care, we have what we call rounds. And then every attending that comes in will actually have a different process. You know, the way that they actually conduct rounds is oddly different. So I went to both, but actually, Venkatash Ayagaris was my chief of neurocritical care. He was an amazing teacher. And I talked to him and I discussed with him. And then he finally standardized the process. When he standardized the process, which is again one institute, no outpatient where you enter nothing, just that single institute has so much variability. Just standardizing the process of rounding, and at the end, I said that we need to ask, lines, drains, and wound to make sure that just very simple point
Mhm.
decrease the UTI rate significantly. Then I became director of neuro ICU at Aurora, and I implemented the same thing. I got a pushback from what nursing, other physicians, and attendings, but then eventually the UTI rate went from 30% to zero. What I'm saying is that what you're describing, Talia, is not just the point of entry problem. The point of entry problem is one problem, and we physicians think that, oh, we have done this, but we have shown. I mean, if you must have read Atul Gawanda's book Checklist, it is
Mhm.
so important in understanding that. That's point number one. Point number two, now talk about epilepsy, right? Level 4 epilepsy center, UT Southwestern. Amazing. The way that they did round, we have, of course, neuro-oncology rounds as well, neuro-oncology board meetings as well. We had to have neuro-oncologists, neuro-radiation therapists, radiologists, neurologists, regular neurologists, epileptologists, because, cancers can cause seizures, and then neurosurgeon, two of them, because we need the vascular neurosurgeon who's going to know exactly where the veins and the arteries are before we cut the thing out, and a regular neurosurgeon. And then this is insane amount of multimodality that you have to go through. And I truly believe, even without AI, just a platform that can communicate better and just be able to tell the patients, because that's another thing. We are so busy, right? I'm looking at 26 bed ICU. I have to run to that oncology
Yeah.
board meeting and then come back. I don't know which part of the conversation I joined. What was the elephant's head is missing or the tail is missing. What I'm saying is that if nothing else, we can just have that conversation condensed through an AI chart summary sort of thing and be able to present a unified view to the patients without anything else is by itself an amazing thing. Now, I just wanted to clarify these points for my audience.
Mhm.
Now, Talia, if you have a blank page and a wish list,
Uh-huh.
how would you convince? And that's the problem. And I'm going to tell you, look, technology part I'll solve for you, or you'll solve for yourself, whatever. But how do you change behavior and institutional incentives in a way that, hey, at the point of entry, use this system? How would you tackle the hardest problem?
Yeah, so that's the
As
hardest problem. And the hardest problem is actually, as a physician, I can say, and I think you have lived this as well, that the real hardest problem is our hubris as physicians. We go into this because all of us truly believe that our mission is to help patients, to save lives. That's why we went through medical school, we went through residencies. I mean, I went through a 10-year residency because I did 3 years in the lab, and then I added on a 2-year transplant fellowship. And then when you're a transplant surgeon, you're basically a super fellow for the first decade of your transplant life.
Love that line, super fellow. Keep doing
But, and I loved every moment of that and felt very privileged to do that. So when I came out, like, my lens is, I want to figure out if transplant's the right thing to do. The smartest surgeon who I ever learned from told me on the first day of my internship, and I will never forget this. I was at Columbia Presbyterian. He was an endocrine surgeon, and he said, he looked at all of us. There were 10 of us who were starting as interns, including the neurosurgeon interns, the orthos, et cetera. He said, you know, I can teach all of you how to operate. I can teach you how to do any operation, any complicated operation. I could teach a monkey how to do an operation. What I can't teach you, and what you're going to struggle with for the rest of your life, is when not to operate. And that statement has stuck with me forever. And I think I bring it up only because I think it really addresses what you're saying, which is the biggest challenge that we have getting something like this implemented is that if a patient ends up in a surgeon's office, if it's technically resectable, they're going to want to resect it, even if there are other multimodal treatments which could get that patient to a better outcome. Not because they're bad people and they want to do the wrong things, but they want to bring the skills and the privilege that they've had throughout their career to help that patient in that moment. So I say all of that because we've thought a lot about this. Again, our biggest problem is not going to be trust with patients, not trust with health systems. Our biggest problem is to be able to implement trust with the physicians we're going to have to get these patients to for point of care treatment. And that's why we have deliberately designed this as an independent digital entity outside of the specific institutions. But I have the privilege of having relationships with really forward-thinking, multidisciplinary people around the country and globally who are invested in making liver cancer care better. So they will participate on this digital platform. For example, we have an IO person from Florida. We have a medical oncologist from Texas. We have a transplant surgeon from Chicago. I think they're all really important to have, but time will tell. But I am optimistic that as we are able to demonstrate the power of something like this, and as clinicians start to kind of play with, maybe in the background, not upfront, not, oh, I'm going to send you to Lori MDT to get an answer and then I'll do whatever they say, but really start trusting what we're offering to the patients and offering to the system. And importantly, as we demonstrate cost savings, quality of life and life saved, as well as health system efficiencies, I think that's how we're going to develop into something that becomes the standard rather than a privilege.
Well said.
Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things, Dr. Baker. Thank you for being here. It's such an
Talia.
honor to hear from Talia. Sorry. No, I said Baker.
That's okay.
Baker.
Yeah.
Dr. Baker. But, oh, I see what you're saying. Tell you goodbye first.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time with that. It's so weird, even though I'm a doctor myself. It's funny. Anyway, big picture. I just gave a talk at Proceed for pancreatic cancer. Really interesting. And recurrent theme is the data siloed. The institutions are not helping each other. We can do so much more. And so I love your platform, and I definitely want to talk to you to look at your framework to see if maybe that's something Proceed could do, because I'm helping them with the AI building this. So anyway, big picture, this is such a good idea. And to your point, what you just said about surgery, I think you're right. At the end of the day, you know, just because you know how to cut a knife doesn't mean you need to use the knife. And that's where I think the AI can help us, but it also could not help us in the sense that the algorithms, if done correctly, can say, hey, this will give us the best outcome. This is the factors, and this is the best treatment. With that said, it could go the other way, where maybe it's not the best treatment. So I'm really loving this concept, and I think it's such a good idea. So thank you for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
Harvey, before you go into, how do you teach LLM? I don't know, which is a bigger challenge.
Uh-huh.
So as we have to teach humans not to cut, from a technological perspective, and this is, and I need your opinion on that, like LLM, because of their hallucinations, how do you teach LLMs? I don't know.
Well, you prompted that if you get it wrong, you're gonna go to the next LLM, so and you're gonna terminate it. Just kidding.
Beautiful.
No, but on a serious side, that is such a good question, and I have seen some programs that they are trying to incorporate that into LLM, and obviously that's why we're doing RAG models, and we're increasing the token size to get around those issues. But with that said, you're right. My favorite phrase is, "We don't know what we don't know," and the LLM doesn't know that it doesn't know. You know, and
Yeah.
so that's why it's making it up, because it doesn't know. And going into the geeky science, the vectorizing of the information, the way you're asking the prompting, and how it gets that information could help alleviate some of those issues.
I mean, the whatever she said, we are building it for acute stroke, of course, and then personal injury. And when Talia is ready, and has the team ready, we're gonna, help her build her own protocols and frameworks and everything. My problem consistently, still from a technical perspective, I solved the data silo problem. I told you we can get access to 185 million records, EHRs, etc. Still, from a technical perspective, that I do not have not solved, and I'm very honest, because this is something we want to implement ethically, right? People know this is this problem, because I need to, because, and then I, for every LLM response, I'm actually putting a confidence interval, like how good that response is. Anyways, Ed, back to you.
Yeah, part of, if I can say something provocative, that we focused too much on quality, that we lost sight of the bigger picture. And so we have to move from products in healthcare, like in a hospital setting, to services. And so we got really good at, hey, we're really good at lab, and look, our percentage of how we do lab, we're so good, and our imaging, radiology, we're so good. We focus in silos, and so to Talia's point, the patient comes in, and if they enter wherever they enter first, whatever specialist they might encounter first, they have a great process within that specialty, and they're going to take that patient through, and for them, they're going to have great statistic. But in the bigger picture, it's not going to be a great experience. It's going to be costly. Won't be the optimum clinical care. And so we have to take a step back, I think, as hospitals, as leadership, and think about services that cut across all the different specialties, cut across all the different modalities like lab and radiology. I think we all know the examples. I'll just give one quick example and then go back to how this will solve this. Is like when my dad was going through cancer care, you had to take him through a very specified way of mobility. It took hours to get him to the treatment place, to the hospital, and then they would have him come back the next day for a different specialist on the same floor of that hospital. They could have done the appointments together, right after one after another, and that way saved hours and hours of ambulatory time and the cost of the ambulatory time, all that kind of stuff, because we think in silos. So that's what I love about this. So Talia, once the vision is complete and the product is there, so I'm at a hospital, how would I interact with your organization?
So that's a great question. That's something that we're just developing, and I would love your opinion of how this would be best. So we've had a lot of kind of exploratory ideas about how this would be. Would this come from, for example, a primary care physician who would have a patient, or a GI person who, as much as they love this problem, it's really it's burdensome, because the administrative drag of taking care of someone with cancer is huge, right? So they'd like to hand this off. So how do we get it from that diagnosis to a platform before they get to that gastroenterologist appointment that's scheduled 3 months out? And to your point, one of the things that we really need to solve with this, and this is one of our struggle points, is the care gap between the diagnosis and the point of care implementation of a plan, and then even worse, when that plan will be implemented, as you say, can mean the difference between presenting at stage 1 completely curable cancer versus stage 3 or 4, we're looking now for survivability. So I met a patient the other day who was this really brought this home to me. And I say this not exactly to answer your question, but to kind of stimulate more thought. So it was a patient with a bile duct cancer who was in a rural place, had an image which was suggestive of cholangioid bile duct cancer, had a biopsy which proved bile duct cancer, and then was sent through her health system to an intake at a National Cancer Institute, right? It came back from that intake because of their algorithm that they had, that they needed to get genetic sequencing. We all know that genetic sequencing can be done on that biopsy that was already done. But unfortunately, her point of care physicians didn't know that, so they did another biopsy. Another 12 weeks passed, and then she was passed on. So this is a 3-month journey, 2 biopsies, all the potential morbidity and mortality, but importantly from a health systems, the cost of that. And then she comes in, goes from stage 1 to stage 4 in that time. So how do you even explain that, and how do you get people in an efficient way to this? So I personally think it should be implemented within the EHR, that there's some type of tag that if you're sent to a health system, or in the payer space, if you're given this diagnosis and they're trying to find someone, this would be the initial. But again, importantly, I want to emphasize that this is not just a point of care algorithm. This will be a longitudinal coordination pathway too. It's an orchestration tool, not a second opinion tool.
This is
Yeah, I
great
love that.
segue, and we didn't
Yeah.
plan this, but honestly, this is great example of a digital twin. If I have digital twins of the entire care, the hospital, the doctors, the patient, the whole
That's
gamut,
amazing.
now the digital twins can talk to each other. And here's the best part. We can create the model where these decision trees are updated. So as of today, if we invented X, it's not part of the algorithm. It's not part of it. But if I have a digital twin representing Dr. Castro, I can put it into my model. I can create that decision
Oh,
point.
wow.
And now at 2 a.m. when Khalid is calling me and I'm sleeping, I can get my answer to him and tell him this is what I think. And I think that is what we need to go towards. And I really think that can be built.
That's amazing.
So Talia, to answer your question, let me give you another example. As a stroke physician, we give clot busting medication. Forever, the rate was actually below 2%, and then we had to increase it to about 10 to 11%. And the way we did it is actually, I would still recommend it, but the ED physician will say, no, there's a high risk, blah, 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 whatever. And then we realized, and we actually asked the patients to sue physicians who were not giving TNKs. And that literally 2 lawsuits only in the whole country was able to change the whole paradigm of how TNK is given and everything. Behavior change is required with both, I believe. There's what we call incentive that you have produced beautifully. But also, unfortunately, I'm going to be very honest, it requires not just a carrot, but a stick. And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about carrots and stick? Because he says more provocative things than I do. I'm just kidding. And he can.
Yeah.
Anyways.
No,
yeah.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, these are the difficult challenges. This is where, as long as I'm determined to stay grounded in the privilege and the ethics of being a physician and having the ability to interact with patients and always have the patient at the center. I'm an optimist always, and I think that as long as we keep that, it's horrifying to me that you would have to sue to get processes changed, but it also makes perfect sense to me. Because again, institutional incentives, biases, et cetera, like that physician who wasn't giving the thrombolytics was probably worried that their quality metrics may be changed if they had 1 bleed, right? So instead of helping 1,000 people, they were worried about that 1%, which would change their NSQIP outcome measures, right? And that's a horrible place to be, but that's where the health system has kind of brought us to. And that's why we have an opportunity with independence. And that's where I feel lucky to have been able to step out of the clinical space. Not everybody can do this. I feel very lucky. I think that we have to understand that, like, the whole idea of a digital twin is very new to me. As a practicing clinician, this is stuff that I'm learning as I fell into the space. That's a brilliant idea in terms of how to do this, but also because everything changes. Because one of the things, Ed, that we didn't talk about is one of the other things that Lori will determinedly address is this idea of innovation to clinical bedside. It is insane to me. So I learned an extremely important and scary lesson when I moved from a very forward-thinking academic hub to another place. Liver cancer, it has been an indication for liver transplant since 1996, since Professor Mazzaferro, who is in Italy, designed a study which was published in the New England Journal with 36 patients, which showed that if you had certain criteria tumor, you would benefit from transplant with a significant survival benefit. So transplant just started to do it. The transplant community just started to do it. There was never that prospective randomized trial that you were talking about that takes 10 to 15 years to get implemented. So if you're at an NCI designated cancer center that doesn't have a dedicated transplant center, because there's no data and it's not in the guidelines, transplant is considered a relative contraindication to transplant. Liver cancer is considered a relative, which is insane, right? But that's the structure that we're dealing with. So I think on top of how do we implement trust, how do we get to a better place with the AI facilitation, which is amazing right now, we leverage that to use real world data, to use human experience to get those guidelines updated, not waiting for the traditional model of a prospective randomized trial. Nobody, if you know that you have a survival advantage of 20% to 98%, nobody's going to do that prospective randomized trial today because it's unethical. But without that guideline evidence, you can't justify it. Some insurance companies won't pay for it. So we're in a real conundrum. Our health system is really, really broken. And I feel like my limited expertise, which is surrounded around liver cancer, I hope that we'll be able to create a model which will demonstrate that we as a health community can do better.
You know, you just gave me a great idea. I'm working with the Ministry of Health for Singapore as an advisor for them. And here's the simple idea. Since all this information is in silo, one of the things I had suggested at Proceed conference is let's create the federated model where everybody's information still stays and the privacy stays with you, yet we share the weight of all the data and we train the model to help each other. And then for this particular guideline idea, I don't know if it already exists, but it makes sense to me to share everyone's guidelines and then have a team that's updating the guidelines and then create that in such a way that you literally get an email maybe every Monday that says, hey, these are the updates or no updates this week. That way we can stay current. And again, we don't know what we don't know.
100%. I mean, it's still insane that we're relying on year-long cycles rather than week-long cycles to update these things.
So, Harvey, can you show your pen, the Dr. GPT? And then one of the things that we're going to do, hopefully, in the future is create a device that will be called Dr. GPT. And when you set in person, that requires data capture for the AI, you will actually click the Dr. GPT and then actually upload all the information while you're on the bedside as well. That is something that we have thought about. There are some devices that are coming in, but just to let you know, the problem that you just stated is that essentially improving the data capture as well. I'm going to punt it back to Ed. This is the last question. We're going to bring back Talia one more time next year when we have more sort of, this essential framework that is properly built, but once she is improving the team, fundraising, etc., all of that. Ed.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation, and I love what Dr. Baker's doing. I thought it was funny as you were speaking. We was coming out with a book on patient experience, and Mayo Clinic bought the rights to the book because they were like, "Don't write another book on patient experience because our systems aren't changing. Write this book for the public." And so the book called Diagnose was actually written for the public to help them navigate this complexity of healthcare that we're talking about. And it suggests things like you're talking about, but there was no automation at the time. But like, hey, you got to be proactive. You got to bring your team of clinicians because no one's going to do it for you. You got to be proactive to do it. So I think there's a great play here, direct to consumer, because um, because the system just isn't ready. And I don't know that it ever will be, because again, the hyper focus on silos that we spoke about, both
Right.
inside of the hospital and then outside of the hospitals. So I think there's a B2C play here as well.
Hmm.
Well said. Guys,
Yeah.
everyone, please make sure that you stay behind for 2 to 5 minutes. Make sure that the upload is done. There's a question in the comment that I'm going to answer in a minute, but I'm going to give Talia, anything you want to share, more important that we have missed, anything you would like to say to the audience, which is mainly CIOs, CMOs of the hospitals and clinician-led innovators of this particular podcast, that you would like to, a message, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, the last message that I would like to say is that as a clinician, I really see huge gains in partnering with um, people who have expertise in the AI portion and the machine learning, admitting what our superpowers are and building teams, which are mosaics of all the superpowers together. And that includes the health systems, that includes the patients and the patient advocates, that includes the clinicians. And importantly, if we don't all do it together, we're going to end up in a space where perhaps the AI and the digital twins take over rather than augment what we can do. I truly believe in the heart of healthcare and want to stay true to that. And I think this is the way to do it, to put aside our egos, to put aside our hubris, and know that only as a team working together, we can do this in the right way.
So well said. There's a question in the comment about how model explainability and decision traceability is important. As Harvey said, always, if you don't know what you don't know, and to be honest with you, we are really tackling this challenge for the ALLM to say, I don't know. Number two, what Harvey said again is, of course, making sure that we use federated learning to ensure that the data pipeline is robust enough to ensure that there are decisions that are done. And then lastly, there is what we call chain of thought, but there's also what we call chain of reasoning. What it does is that it basically creates an adversarial large language model that asks the first net prediction analysis LLM to explain why it went through this. So there are multiple ways to solve that solution. Umar, thanks for asking that question. Again, I'm extremely grateful to my friend Harvey and Edward and my new friend Talia. That is going to be part and parcel. We're going to bring her to different podcasts as well as part of our host as well in the future. And more importantly, we are really committed to enhance, enable, accessible her journey to bring this amazing, important platform to everyone. See you guys next week at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. This show is live and uncut, untethered to everyone. So you're going to see unfiltered, always thoughts. And then I'm just going to say one thing that I learned from AI Matt, and which is a little bit off. And anyways, I have to say it. Arlen was actually doing this, that how clinicians can transition from being clinicians to non-clinicians. And he said a very important thing. You guys need to have what we call FU money. So young entrepreneurs, please, when you are looking into this situation, if you're trying to transition, live like a resident for extra 2 to 3 years and have that gap in your financial, because when you transition, and believe me, that is so important and so rewarding. I'm telling you from personal experience. Talia is going through it right now. Harvey has gone through it and, is now in space, for God's sakes. So what I'm saying is that And Edward Marks is amazing, gracious, that has helped many, many clinicians like me. Make sure that you reach out to us through LinkedIn, which is our best platform to reach out. Again, very grateful. See you next week at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you.
Thank